of the big struggles for me that I've talked about a lot is to find out why people can't figure out who's good and who's bad. Like clearly bad actors are going unnoticed almost, and in fact encouraged rather than being called out. So this is really about importance. It's about the levels. It's about hierarchy. This is really the quality of data versus the quantity of the message. And it's all wrapped up in a type of missing discernment that hopefully I can demonstrate to you today. So it's one thing to make a claim, say masks are a good thing for stopping the spread of some fake news virus scamdemic. It's another thing to then cite that claim. I'm making that claim because I read it here in the New York Times or wherever. But it's another thing to make a claim that the science says something. And again, you could also cite, you don't have to though, and a lot of people don't. That's a red flag. So you're making an appeal to something without backing up that appeal, right? That's what the lack of the citation is. But it's another thing entirely to make a claim like that when there's no data. And this is why citations are important. They're not everything. They can be used to fool you, but they're important, right? Because a lot of people will cite something and look, this is data on mask usage, but it doesn't actually cover whether or not masks are effective for the general public and a pandemic. That would be important to know. So the fact that the citation doesn't match the claim is a good thing to know, because that means that person's lying. Now, whether they're lying because they know better, or whether they're lying because they're ignorant, or whether they're lying because they're just going along with something, I don't know. And I don't actually care because I'm a pragmatist. It solves a lot of problems, pragmatism. But it's another thing entirely to make a claim where there is data about the effectiveness of masks and the spread of viri through a population, but that data doesn't support your conclusion. And all of these things are different levels of severity of error. Right? It's one thing to just make a claim, whatever. It's another thing to make a claim with a citation. If that citation doesn't back up your claim, that's a worse error, right? You're stacking errors on top of each other. It's not one error. These are independent errors, except they are dependent on the previous error. So the errors themselves can be made independently, but to claim something and cite a piece of paper or white paper or something that refutes your claim, which people do all the time, by the way. I see this constantly because I research things. I check them out, right? That means you've made a claim. It means you've made a claim without evidence, even though you've cited something. It means that you've tried to use that citation to deceive, right? Now you don't have to intend to do any of this. You don't even know that you've done this stuff, but it still happened. And if you're somehow making that many errors, and errors of that severity, because they're all also different severity errors, there's a problem. Right? A person doing that should not be trusted, not because they're not honest, not because they're not smart, but because if you make those levels of errors, if you're making errors that severe for whatever reason, who knows what other errors you're making? But it must be a lot, because you're not noticing the easiest to notice and the most obvious errors of all. So what good is knowledge if you're making these errors? The knowledge is no good at all. And that's just around, we'll say, the data aspect, right? Where you have data, it's around the type of claim you're making. Are you making a scientific claim, or are you just, giving somebody your opinion, right? Of course, the right move is not even to give an opinion if you don't know anything. And if you're pressed into giving an opinion, make sure everybody knows it's your opinion. But don't say the science says blah, 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 and that's why my opinion is right. People do that all the time. Don't do that. It's terrible. If somebody does that and you catch them, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. But it also matters who, because the world is not equal. Let me give you an example. So I used to run my own businesses actually, but I have one primary business where all of my other businesses went through for the most part. And I would file my taxes. Now, I learned all my own taxes. The tax code's not that hard, actually. I mean, there's some hard parts about it. You can get some sticky things if you're doing like wacky investments and things. I never had the money to do that. So, not that I was poor, I had quite a bit of money, but I was not using it to do complicated investment strategies. There are certain things about the tax code in the United States that are very deliberately ambiguous, right? You do your taxes this way, you can same numbers, different forms, do your taxes this way. There's an easy example of this. I don't know how valid this is anymore, but it used to be you just file your short form deductions, which is just you get used to be like $3,300 for yourself, right? Or you always in my lifetime had the option. Like I said, maybe it's gone now. I don't know. I don't really do my taxes anymore. You could do what's called the long form deductions. And you had a choice. You could fill out the long form, and if you didn't have more than $3,300 worth of deductions, you could just file the short form. No one cared, right? It's an option. It's up to you. But there's a lot of little things like this, and some of them aren't so little in the tax code. Now, I had found that there's a certain way to file your taxes, which I did for decades, by the way. And the IRS, believe me, was all over my taxes all the time. And they never said a word about any of this. There were other things they didn't like, usually minor things. With the exception of one, they were always their mistake. Like they were actually just making math errors. Very annoying when the IRS doesn't know how to add and subtract numbers, but it happens. Believe me, happened like 4 times. I had a certain order and a certain set of forms I would use to file all my stuff. And what happened was, one day I went to like H&R Block. I had something I wanted them to do because it was just too much work. And they did my taxes and it was way higher. It was like 30% more money. And I was like, what are you doing? And then I looked at what their automated system was doing and I was like, no, that's not the right way to file that. They said, well, this is our automated system. We plug it into the computer. The computer doesn't work. I'm like, I understand. I'm a computer guy. I get it. So I went to a tax accountant and he said, I can't file your taxes this way. And I said, what do you mean? I've been filing my taxes this way for years at that point. It was 6 years. I said, they've scrutinized my taxes. I've got my taxes kicked back a couple times, usually for their error. But he's like, no, it's too much liability. And I'm like, what do you mean too much liability? He says, no, I have a CPA. If they look funny at this, it's on me if I file it for you. And I'm like, well, okay, but like, this isn't a problem. There's nowhere in the tax code that this is a violation. And he said, I know, but I'm not going to take the chance. I said, I know a CPA that will file it this way. And I said, no, thanks. It's fine. I understand. It's perfectly reasonable. So I filed it eventually. So if I file my taxes that way and the IRS suddenly decides we don't like this or it's wrong, which again, they never did, I can't get in trouble for that. I can get in trouble for filing taxes late, and they used to play this game with me all the time. Oh, well, because you had to refile. Yeah, but I didn't refile anything. I just sent you paperwork that you claimed you lost while claiming that I owed you money, which means you couldn't have lost the paperwork, right? So they couldn't do anything to me beyond fines and late fees and things like that. The CPA could lose his license and all of his business and his entire livelihood. The world is not equal. It matters who does what. It matters a lot because it's not an equal world. He's got a license. He's got all these obligations. He takes classes, right? CPAs have to take classes to do this work, this tax work. Any tax professional does. And it's just different when you're a normal person. Right? And so it's worth understanding that. And there's lots of situations where that's true. I mean, there was an old thing. I don't know how true this actually was. I know for a fact there were a couple of cases like this, but I don't know how ensconced in law we'll say it was. But there was this whole thing about whether or not you're so good with your hands in terms of martial arts that they have to be licensed as lethal weapons. probably an urban legend. However, there were cases where people got into bar fights, got in a lot of trouble because they basically beat the crap out of somebody. And somebody went, yeah, but you're a martial artist. You should have known when to stop or something. I think that's kind of ridiculous. Somebody punches you, I'm sorry. They're forfeiting. That's it. You punch somebody who can beat the crap out of you, you forfeited. That's what happened there. So, there are these concepts where with greater knowledge, right, or greater skill comes greater responsibility. Right? If I work on my house and I screw up the plumbing, no one's getting sued. Nothing bad's going to happen to me other than the damage from the plumbing. Now, if a plumber does it, the same things happen to me, but something could also happen to the plumber in addition, right? It's not an equal world. And so that gets me into the next part of this, right? Which is it matters who's making what kind of a claim, right? So there's more here to talk about. If some random person on Twitter makes a claim about the science, right or wrong, right? They just say, oh, well, according to, scientific consensus, mask usage, reduces the spread of viruses through a population. That's one thing. They're a random person on Twitter, right? But again, if somebody who works for the government does this, that's a problem, right? Anywhere in the government, they should not be tweeting out publicly, right? Except in certain circumstances, which we'll get to later. Right. But that's a worse crime than random Joe on the Twitter, right? It's just worse. And if somebody who works with one of the groups that deals with scientific funding, maybe not even in the government, but they're part of some NGO, or they're part of some government contractor or whatever, because they're doing science on the behalf of the government. If they do this, that's even worse. It's worse than some guy in the money printing department at the Department of Engraving does it, right? Like, this is worse because they're closer to the thing, right? They're closer to the science. Now, if someone is in charge at making decisions at the government level tweets this out, right? They're not supposed to be a public persona necessarily. That's even worse. Like, it's a stacking set of crimes here. And the thing is, if you have somebody who we'll say is in charge of making recommendations, we'll say both internally to the government and occasionally to the public, and they're making those recommendations on a public stage, like on the TV or on the Twitter, right? They have additional obligations to make sure the information is correct first. So there's a set of conditions below that where they just shouldn't be talking publicly. That's a different problem. These are people who should be talking publicly. But if you should be talking publicly, you have an additional responsibility. It's more incumbent upon you to make sure you have your facts correct, to bring the citations, to talk to the experts and make sure, because you're speaking on their behalf more often than not, that they actually agree with this position. That's part of your job at that point, by definition. By definition, you're part of the government, you're at the top, you're heading up an agency, maybe the CDC, could be any agent, could be the FDA, doesn't really matter. And the thing is, if they didn't do that work, and therefore their claim is false, that is always a crime. It's a crime. It's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong, and it's legally fraud. Period. End of statement. Just the way these things are defined in our culture in terms of language. Not even going to get into a didn't mean it sort of a nonsense thing. It doesn't matter. You've made so many mistakes. All of those things are mistakes. All of them. You have a responsibility as a government employee to shut up unless you're in a position where you're allowed to speak publicly, right, to guide the public or to make public statements, in which case you now have way more responsibility to make sure that what you're saying is true, correct, and accurate, and that it reflects your beliefs. Because it doesn't reflect your beliefs, you should resign instead. You can always do that. And that stacking matters a lot. And the thing is, in some cases, both these sets of errors can be made, where a public official doesn't come with citations, is quoting a science that doesn't say anything like what he says it does, but it is relevant. In other words, oh, we tested this. The test just came out negative, and you're saying the test came out positive. That's fraud. That's lying. That's definitely bad. There's no goodness in that. It is not a redeemable act. You should never do that, ever, as a public official. As a private citizen, yeah, whatever, you make your mistakes. I don't care. I won't even see it, hopefully. I wish you wouldn't do it on X, but I don't run X. So if I did, you wouldn't be able to do it on the Twittery X. That's for sure. When both these errors combine, that's not one mistake. It's not the number of mistakes or the number of mistakes times each other. It's an exponential error. It's the type of error that has to be deliberate at some level. It's not an accident. You didn't slip and fall down 17 flights of stairs and then bump into 7 people and accidentally set off a nuclear weapon all through one accident. That didn't happen, okay? That doesn't happen. That's not a thing that can happen. But that is the equivalent type of a claim. Oh, I didn't know, right? And of course you did. And if you didn't, you were responsible for doing so. And the fact that you didn't is worse, not better. You're not getting off on the ignorance claim there. Your responsibility as part of that job is to resign when you don't know and make the claims that you are only the claims that you are certain about, that you can back up with evidence. It's not that hard. That's your responsibility. One job, right? One job. Don't make claims that are false. That's all you have to do. It's actually not that hard. Maybe uncomfortable, but it's not that hard. And the thing is, because we culturally lack a way to see how these things are connected, but we still feel them, right? We can barely articulate them. Even for the people that can see them, clearly, they can barely articulate this. But we know it's a bad crime. Like, we know this is worse somehow than other things, but we can't quite express it, right? This is why it's taken me so long to do this video. It's like, how do you explain something so clear? Because I feel it, right? It's an intuition, right? It's not well, I thought about this rationally no. It's obvious. I don't need to think about it rationally. It's apparent to me, all the errors that are inherent in this. It's very hard to explain. But a lot of people just lost that sense of severity, that way to discern importance in the world, that relevance realization that Dr. Vervaeke keeps talking about, that understanding of and appreciation for how bad things really are in a given situation. Government official gets up, lies about something. Oh, by the way, he's done all this before. That might have been good to know, but I did know that, by the way. A little bit of research. Internet's a wonderful thing. It's really bad. It says really bad things about the government. It says really bad things about the people in the government that didn't catch this, A, the first time around. That would have been good in the 80s, or B, this time, having seen it once. Like, you've already seen this once. Savings and loan scandal, the 2008 housing crisis, same fraud, same everything, right? We want to pretend it's different. It's not. Once that sort of disconnection happens, it's no wonder to me why people will defend murderers, let them out of jail, give them no jail time, ignore omissions of important facts, right? And will double down on obviously incorrect claims and then ignore all the evidence to the contrary. They have no standard by which to measure the severity of error itself. And that all boils down to trust in whatever it was they were trusting. And that trust cannot be broken. It can only be strengthened because they don't have a way to understand the severity of errors. You need to know how severe errors are in order to know when to break trust over something. Maybe if you're in a plane close to the atmosphere and you've paid a lot of money and you go weightless, you still trust gravity. Probably a good plan. It's probably a temporary situation that can't be maintained for very long for you. Just saying. But maybe, if a government official gets up and tells you that there's all these studies about the efficacy of masks in the spread of virus through a population, and you bother to go look it up, because it's available publicly, by the way, and that's not what the papers say. In fact, they say there's no evidence that masks do anything at all for the spread of viruses through a population. We have a problem. This is a severe error. This is the worst type of error. This is treason. It's not treason, so that's good to know. It really is. It's really important to understand that. And lots of people made this claim, but they weren't the one person, at least from the US perspective, that needed to get it right, that was actually responsible for getting it right, that actually had access and should have known, but almost certainly did. I just flat out lied and knew he lied. Whatever. Because we need to know what to trust, who to trust, and when to break trust. It's not some eternal universal force, this trust. It's yet another thing we must navigate. We must discern. We must make sense of, and we must care for properly, lest all society, all culture around us fail